White people are unaware that race is a human construct and it keeps its power because the majority of the people continue to support the misinformation. The idea of race was created by white people to divide and devalue for use in structural oppression. The only biological origins that race has is the ones that white people have awarded it. White people are so defensive when we talk about racism, it's nearly impossible to hold a meaningful conversation. We think it's about us personally. It's actually about a system that we were all born into. We didn't invent the system, but we can help dismantle it by lowering our guard and learning the truth about our real racial history so we can teach other white people. White people believe that systemic racism is a naturally occurring, inevitable phenomenon. But systemic racism in America was deliberately invented and designed to ensure that the accumulation of generational wealth for Black people would be significantly harder to attain, if not impossible. For example, the impact of redlining over decades and decades at the city, state, and federal level has a huge impact even today, with a lack of investment in infrastructure. And on top of that, city and state school tax codes get their money from the businesses around them. If property values are low, it makes for incredibly impoverished schools where giving a great education is nearly impossible. We believe all Americans have an equal chance of success if we have a talent and work hard. This meritocracy myth is being exposed more than ever today. Success in America is not based solely on a person's ability and talent, but rather on a number of complex things like class, privilege, wealth, and who you know. Systemic racism is all about who holds the power over who gets access to the resources necessary to succeed in a capitalist economy. The racial wage gap shows that for every $100 a white family has, a Black family only has $10. We think of racism as simply someone who dislikes somebody because of their skin color. But this view is an unsophisticated and outdated definition. Today's racism is covert and riddled with deniability. It changes and morphs over time in order to remain an unspoken but ever-present cultural indoctrination. White people are not aware of the deceptive laws formulated using false information in order to justify circumventing the spirit of the Constitution and thwarting human rights. Voting rights for Blacks is an example of how racism can change in form. The 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote, but then grandfather clauses were passed, which kept former enslaved humans and their descendants from voting. Next came Jim Crow, literacy tests, poll taxes, and other legal obstacles to vote. Then in 2013, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down the spirit of the Voting Rights Act by making voters be the ones who had to bear the burden of proving they had been discriminated against. Before the Voting Rights Act was gutted, the burden was on the state to prove beforehand that any voting changes would not disenfranchise. Despite multiple court rulings saying that we don't have an election fraud problem in America, a number of states decided to pass laws closing polling places and implementing unnecessarily expensive and time-consuming proof of citizenship requirements in Black communities. States implemented mail-in voting restrictions. They closed down essential businesses where citizens could get the ID necessary to vote. They had voting deadlines reduced, DMVs closed, ballot boxes removed, and Black voters were purged off registration lists. We blindly believe the propaganda we see in the media, and we don't understand that the fairness doctrine does not exist anymore. The fact is, we will follow a station that has only our views and no counterpoints. The problem is, the media is a business whose number one objective is to make a profit, not to take a moral high ground. Fox News is considered entertainment TV in Canada and not actual news. In fact, a Manhattan judge tossed out a defamation lawsuit against Fox News, stating that no reasonable person could possibly believe them. 3 out of every 4 white Americans do not have a single close friend who isn't white just like them. So our knowledge of Black culture is viewed through the lens of propaganda and for-profit corporations. We believe that racism is something done intentionally. White people generally do not see ourselves in racial terms. There is the normal, which is us, and everyone else is the exception. In order for us to participate in cross-cultural learning, we have to be able to handle seeing ourselves racially. We don't know our own racial history, so we're not aware of the centuries of legal ways white America has historically, purposefully denied Black people the ability to accumulate generational wealth. We're unaware that our history classes in school were whitewashed, and so we got the abridged version of what really happened. We don't know about the horrific events that took place after emancipation, such as rednutting, sundown towns, systemic lynchings, the Devil's Punch Bowl, various forms of Black Wall Street massacres, Black codes, extreme segregation in every facet of life.
If you believe, like I do, that it's way past time for white America to take racial responsibility, please consider subscribing.